Let's welcome, where am I? I've lost my place. Let's welcome Lynn Stafford. How could I forget? An environmental scientist up here on the mountain.
Good evening. I can't see anybody. Okay, can you hear me? Very good. I'm going to take a different track from the fantastic storytelling that we've encountered so far. And I think maybe I do need to sit down. You can hear me. All right. I'm taking the background of a white biologist. So this is the white culture, this is the European culture, and the European type science training, and adapting that to California. I lived in California for 75 years. That's how old I am in a couple of weeks. All right. And I have tried to visit as much of the state as possible. Either while I was growing up, while I was a teacher, or after I became an environmental scientist. And I'm still trying, but now mostly in our own backyard, close right here in one of the most incredible parts of the state. One of the things that I've been interested in is the minds of animals, and of course the minds of humans. Humans tend to measure animals in terms of human activity. For instance, we all know that all animals score poorly on IQ tests compared to humans. Do we also know that humans made those IQ tests? Yes. And but it's not talked about very much. Now, I'm not trying to say that animals are like humans. My point is, one, we don't know much about animal brains, and two, they are very complex. They're different. And the best thing that you can do is go in with an open mind. And you may learn more, but you certainly are not going to understand them. And this is what I've tried to do much of my life. The story I wanted to tell you is a true story. It's a story, I was asked to tell a true nature story, and that's what this is. It occurred on a cold March morning, foggy, somewhere up in the Redwood country in Mendocino County, near the coast, in 1990. So let's see if I can remember it. That's a quarter of a century ago, practically. Actually, I do remember it very clearly. And there's something that happened that has imprinted that event in my brain. Okay, we were studying owls. This is a team of biologists. And we were studying the spotted owl. Some of you may know that the spotted owl is one of the species that is threatened with extinction. And a lot of work has been done on it. There's been a lot of controversy because this owl does not like open places. It doesn't like young forests. It lives in old growth, deep dark forests generally. And so that comes into conflict with logging interests. Now, a lot has been found out or been discovered in the last couple, 3 decades. And I think things are settling down now, and the industry is living better, and the Forest Service is living better with the owl. The spotted owl is a retiring animal that most people have little chance of ever detecting. However, they're very tame, but they simply are not where and they're not active when people are apt to determine them. So our job up here in some timber land was to learn more about them. And we were banding them, and we were also determining nesting activity and nesting success. And I have to understand a few things about the spotted owl before I tell my story. One is they're very territorial, and their territories can be anywhere from a few hundred acres to several thousand acres, depending on the food availability. They mate basically for life. They do not migrate, and they form a very tight pair bond. Also, when they nest, and they don't nest every year, they nest in cavities, often fire-caused cavities, in very old, twisted giants of trees. These are often the ones that the timber people want to take down because they're no value anymore. So there is value in dead wood and in deformed trees. An unusual thing about their nesting is that the female sits on the eggs for a month without basically getting off. Maybe to go to the edge of the cavity, but that's it. And then she broods the young. And it takes them more than a month to hatch, or to fledge. And then they are still dependent on the parents after that. So there is a period of between 2 and 3 months in which she basically doesn't leave that tree. She is fed by the male. So you can see the necessity for a pretty dependable husband here. All right, now to the story. Okay, it's...
Does the male also feed the young?
What the male does, yes. The male feeds first the female, and then when the young are hatched, then he feeds both. He keeps on feeding them until finally they're fledged, and then they function as a family group and start moving out and work away because they pretty much exhausted the resources near the nest by that time. Okay, so we're back in March. It's pre-dawn. The night before, my fellow biologist Bill and I had been on this abandoned logging road and had determined we were calling, and we had been able to call up a pair. So maybe that's a signal for me to tell you how they call. Woo! 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 And that's species specific to the barred owl. You hear the great horned owl around here, you don't hear that call. And so this is a 4-note location call. And so we got it back that evening, and we got a higher note and a higher pitch and a lower pitch. Now the male is smaller than the female, but he has a lower voice. So we knew we had a pair. So we thought, aha, now we need to find out if they're going to mate this year. So the next morning, we didn't have a chance to go back to our cabin. We were too far out in the woods, so we just slept on the abandoned fire road in our sleeping bags. And then we took off about dawn, or a little bit before dawn. We started calling. We got the birds again, and then we went down after them through the wet sword fern and moss-covered logs and all that stuff. And as we're going towards them, they're coming towards us because they don't like anybody else in their territory. And they stay under the canopy. These birds are never out in the open. And so they're moving from branch to branch, flying short distances, and we're more clumsily going towards them. Finally, we make contact. Okay. I have my vest with all kinds of pockets, and I think my wife doesn't like me to tell this story. but I am carrying little condos. And the condos are PVC capped pipes, about this long, and each one has a white mouse. Now, the white mice are generally raised to feed pet snakes, but in this case, a different fate awaits them. So, the two owls are sitting side by side on a horizontal branch above us, looking at us, and I pull out a mouse and I set it on the little branch because they like to feed, the owls like to feed in trees more than they do on the ground. Okay, so the owls are bobbing up and down, they're looking, checking it out. Male comes down, silent as you can imagine, absolutely nothing. Zip, takes the mouse, goes right back up, and sits next to the female. The female looks at him. He takes the mouse, he positions it so it's head first, and boop, eats it. Okay, the female goes, "Meh." I'm not joking, I didn't make up this call. Okay. Put out another mouse. We go through this routine again. Same result, except that the female is quite a bit more agitated. This time, when he gulps down the mouse, he gets a I mean, she's this far from his ear. And they have very loud sounds. I'm not exaggerating. This goes on to the third mouse got even worse. Really getting ugly up there. Finally, but notice, she never makes an effort to come down and get the mouse. She's as good a hunter as he is. Why? Anybody have any idea why? Huh? Yeah, but why did she not go get it? No, they haven't nested. She's teaching this dumb male. How good a provider is it going to be? That's exactly right. Okay. You think I'm going to have babies with you if you're not going to take care of us? Now, that's adding the human, that's not talking like a scientist. But you, when you see it, you can't help but interpret that. So, on the fourth mouse, he brings it back, and he's looking kind of agitated himself. But he hands the mouse, or I shouldn't say hand, he bills the mouse to the female. And she eats it. I put out a couple more, and they go through that, and then we quit the show. But she never goes down after the mouse. And once he learns what he's supposed to do, he continued to do it. So we waited a couple of 3 weeks until the true beginning of the nesting season. And we came back to this pair and called them in, just like before, went down. The only thing is, when we called them, we only got one response, the male. Okay. That could be very hopeful. So we went down in, made contact with the male, and then we split up, the other biologist and myself. Because what the male will do, if he's taking the food back to the nest site, is he'll fly maybe 100 or 200 yards at a time under the canopy, rest on another branch, and then go again. And so the other biologist went out in the direction that the owl had come from. Since that biologist is 25 years old and I was 50, and not anywhere near as fast as he was the lead guy, and I was the one feeding the owl and then trying to keep in touch with them as they moved on. Well, you keep doing this and hope you stay in touch, and sometimes you have to call to make contact. Sometimes it even takes 2 or 3, 4 days to finally find the nest tree. You don't actually see the nest. but the male will disappear into the tree, and that's the nest. Okay, we did. And then we marked our way to get in there so we could get back, and then we left them alone. By then it was probably mid-April, and we didn't come back until late summer, about the time that the young should be fledging. And this is sort of the epilogue to the story, I guess, is that we went in, and sure enough, they had two recently fledged young. And we followed them around for a few weeks until the young were brave enough to come down and try to get their own food. And we were able to trap them, ban them, and release them. And that basically is the story. And the thing is, they live very complicated lives, very serious lives. But it was funny as heck to watch. And this was probably the stupidest male that we observed up there. Some adolescents are slow to mature. I was told that I was. And I have a feeling that this may have been a new male, may have been only about 3 years old, and he was picking up on how to do it. And that basically is my story, is that there are complex worlds out there. Thank you very much.